pressure. So we need some pressure. And
Welcome
here we go.
to the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Sean, and my buddy over here is...
Fitz. Yeah. Sorry. We were talking about what we were talking about on this podcast, and we didn't get nowhere. But obviously, we got some topics. We're starting out with swinging, actually. We're swinging with Biden because there's a proposal where our gig work is maybe disappearing, or at least they have like a very interesting proposal. And I'm not really a fan of it, but we don't want to be political, but we want to talk about it. So let's jump right into it. So the Biden proposal is basically trying to get rid of gig workers, or at least affecting it extremely, because like Uber, Lyft, and all those companies are basically taking advantage of like gig workers. And for some, it's a really bad thing. Amazon in particular, I think like when they do deliveries, they don't have health insurance and they're subcontractors or whatever. I don't even know how you would explain it, but basically Amazon does not pay their drivers, even though they're riding an Amazon car around, what I think is like horrendous. And the conditions are horrendous in general. We could talk about that too. They made the news a little bit. But yeah,
well, I think this is. First off, man, what do you think about this? Do you think this is needed? Do you think your Uber driver should be an employee and get those nice employee benefits and protections? You know, things like disability protection, for example, if he hurts himself while on the job.
So there's the point now. This is a spectrum. Like we have like Amazon, the evil corporation with labor unions and all that stuff, and then we have like nice jobs like Uber Eats and whatever. What is not really as nice because it's still like wear and tear on the car, but you can basically choose what you pick up and you choose when you work and what you accept. What I really appreciate, because like we both are kind of freelancers, and I do you like freelancing more versus like being in the office? What's your spin on that? First off.
Well, personally, yeah. I mean, I'm in love with the freedom of freelance. So, you know, I think I've had this conversation a lot recently of how you have to trade freedom for safety. And that's kind of what a job is, right? You lose your freedom, but you get all the safety. You get paid time off, you get holiday pay, you get all of these like bonuses, which for me, like some of these things I've never had. I don't know if you've ever had in your career, but I've never had paid time off, for example.
Yeah, so that is also not for every job. Like, there's a lot of jobs that they say they have benefits, but hey, they don't schedule you for, like, let's say 40 hours so you actually get your health insurance. They only schedule you for 36 hours or 35 hours. Yeah. And so I see so many problems with that proposal. Like, oh yeah, gig work, illegal, but 35 hours, yeah. You know, where I'm like, well, so now you're basically bending over all the freelancers. Like, yeah, you don't get the health insurance, and you ban all the gig work, and yeah, that could happen. You know what I mean? As a negative outcome.
So it sounds like you're almost not for this. You're not for Biden's proposal. Did I hear that correct? Or
So on the one side, I really like it, but it's like sneaky people figure out sneaky things. You know what I mean? Like there's always like. Just how I laid it out right now, if I would like to bend the rules, I would bend them like that. Yeah, sure, we'll bend all the gig workers. I hire part-time people, and I don't have to provide anything. And the problem also is like the part-time employees are like way cheaper, obviously. But if you have a full-time employee versus a gig worker, apparently they're like 25 to 30, 40% more expensive because of all those benefits that you mentioned. So, like, I get both sides, and I'm like, I'm on neither side. I just want the best thing for me, and that is usually, like, money and freelancing, you know? So you can determine your pay basically from project to project where, like, I know in the service industry, what I do part-time on the side, they don't even tell you what you will get when you sign up. So they're just like, oh, yeah, you're hired, and they don't even talk about, like, what is your hourly, you know? And they're hiding stuff and hiding benefits. Where it's like, so I don't know if that's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you're, I think you're onto something with people with jobs that take advantage of employees. I mean, my argument would be that gig workers are taking advantage even more than employees. I mean, people like you and I, while we have rights, we don't have as many rights as an employee does. Like things like getting paid, for example.
Yeah.
If you don't invoice correctly, let's say you and me have like a vocal agreement on money, I don't pay. You have so much less protections than you would if I was your boss and we had an agreement and I didn't pay. I could go to jail as your boss and not paying you. Whereas, as you being a contractor, not really. You would have to take all of the work. You would have to take me to court by yourself. You would have to get the lawyer. You would have to do all of it. Where like if you were an employee, you'd get all these protections. So on one end, I kind of see what you're saying. Like by taking everything and putting it into a company, I think places like Uber and these kind of companies are going to be forced to do this. They'll probably play games. They're probably not going to be very honest with their employees. But I think it'll be probably better than how they're treating these poor gig workers now, because we're all gig workers, right? And it kind of scares us, right? We're all there. We're like, we're piecing things together, and if one thing falls apart financially, we're kind of scrambling, right? So I don't know. I think it's a good thing, but it's interesting to see that the second that this was announced, the stock dropped on Uber. The stock dropped on these companies. So what do you think about that?
I think like Uber, I don't know what the stats are right now, but as far as I know, they're not profitable.
Yeah, they've actually been on the decline for years, for a couple few years now.
It's like kind of funny with the stock market. There's like hype projects, or that's how I call them. It's basically like it's a stock that is not profitable, but would be maybe profitable in the future, just like Amazon in the beginning. Not profitable, just reinvested more than they have, with like projected future income, and they basically then maybe collapse. And I'm like, that could just fall away, like Uber and the taxi companies could make a recession. You know what I mean?
So where do you think that comes from? I've actually been kind of interested about that. Like, where did Uber and what's the other one I keep forgetting? But Uber and Lyft.
DoorDash.
What happened to them? Like, why are? Because I've used them a lot this last year. I know that they're still around. I mean, like, why is the stock going down? Why are these not? What do you think's happening with these companies? Why are they on the decline?
Well, there's obviously the war going on. There's financially rent stuff going on. So this year and the last 2 years were quite interesting. Maybe that's the reason why people are more, hey, I shouldn't spend that money, And it's really hard to motivate now somebody to buy something, even though it would be nice to have. But do you feel safe about the future, like financially? Like next year you project like, probably make the same amount or more. What is your feeling? You make more or less, feeling-wise, next year?
Next year?
Yeah.
I think I'm on the up and up. I've had a really bad last year's financial year was pretty dang bad. So when you set the bar
I
pretty
heard about
low,
that Mac.
right? But yeah, so I would say, I think it's gonna. It's hard to know when you look in your crystal ball, right? Because then in a year
It's a
we
feeling
do
thing,
we do a funny episode where we show my video now, and you're like, it's gonna be great, and then it's just chaos and everything's destroyed. I mean, like I think what's weird about the economy, and I think like I was really young during 2008, so I wasn't like necessarily like a professional by then. But what was cool to see in 2008 was that even when the world was kind of the economy was falling apart, people still started businesses, stuff still went well. So it almost seems like the world could be ending, but someone will be doing well. So I guess I guess with that being said, I think I'll be doing well. I think things like this podcast, I think us diversifying our gigs is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, like, so to kind of bring it back to this, where like this proposal came through, I think it's ultimately a good thing, because I think these companies are taking advantage of contractors. I think they really benefit from that, and really, so if you get in a car wreck and you're doing Uber, there's a level of them not taking any responsibility, even if you were on the job. There's sorry, your car's totaled. You now have
actually, I think like Uber is not that bad. We should use Amazon as an example, because like they were like in the news like a couple of times now, basically like with the workers, like, oh, there's a warehouse at fire. You guys still have to pack boxes. I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, they're employees though, so that's what's interesting too. Because in that land now, they're trying to create oh my gosh, and I'm going to forget what it's called, but they're trying to unionize. There we go. They're trying to create a union, And so, because that's an example where the employees acting badly. Because that's what's interesting too. Like, because as we both know, is when you're in a job, you kind of get trapped a little bit. So you don't feel like you even some of these people I think feel even more helpless, like those Amazon workers, where they like I absolutely depend on this job, and there's nothing else in this town that can pay me as much as Amazon. So like you'll do whatever Amazon says because if they fire you, like what else are you going to get in Topeka, Kansas? Like what else are you going to get where they have these Amazon warehouses?
Another thing that I thought was like kind of interesting when I hear the news, I'm like, okay, what would I do to escape the situation, And my immediate default is side hustle, and I'm like, but they work so many hours. I'm like, it's like they are already like to the bone, and it's not like a regular job where you're just like, okay, I'm putting my 20% of labor in and being like, okay, I'm getting my hours. No, it's just like Amazon is like, oh, your performance is not at 105%. We write you up, and they track everything with AI, and they basically grind you down with your capacity, basically. And I'm just like, yeah, if you run that for 8 or 4 hours, you will be mentally not in the same state as somebody like 10 years ago working a regular job, and starting a side hustle on the side with some more time and being a little bit more relaxed. You know what I mean?
Well, what's interesting, and I think and this is just a proposal, Biden's thing right now, but if it becomes law, it'll be interesting to see like where's the line that you have to get to qualify, right? Because what's interesting about this is these Uber drivers get to still make their own schedule, but yet they're an employee, and that's a weird thing all in its own.
That would not work.
Schedule, but you're an employee, so that would be the first time this kind of happens. I think that's why this is kind of a big deal, right? Because there's really no example that I can think of, at least, where you're a full-time protected employee, but then you also make your own schedule.
But nobody says that you're full-time and that you make your own schedule. They have to shift their business model, and they basically just become a taxi company. It's like, okay, we fire all you guys, but we keep the best drivers, and we give them like a regular hourly wage and give them schedule, and they better work that or they get fired. That's how I would do it, because like otherwise it's like, I don't know if it can cover the busy times then, so you just pick the best.
Well, they'll make the argument of like, why should we pay for the health insurance of an Uber driver that only drives once a week? Why should we pay for this one guy that barely does his job, right? So it's going to be interesting to like see like, is it like you have to work a certain amount of hours? I'm guessing that's how it'll probably be if this became a law. It'd be like 20 hours minimum, and then you become an employee or something like that.
Yeah, so that is my problem. That's why I'm assuming like a lot of people get fired and either get hired part-time or full-time. But if they hire full-time, way more people getting fired, And if they do like part-time and no health insurance, and they get the deal basically because it works in other companies, so they would just adapt that because that's the best way to basically run a profitable company, is like hiring part-time people so they don't have to pay benefits and just keep it at the right percentage. What is like really sad, but that's the current reality with everything else,
Yeah, so I mean, so it sounds like you're kind of you're cautious about this. It sounds like you're not necessarily excited for this to happen, or are you?
I literally don't care because like it only matters for me as a freelancer if I want to be like employed or if I want to work like always with the same client, because then it will affect me. Otherwise, if I would like to expand and hire people, it would make that way more scary. So I think it's a bad thing. Like, but on the other side, I get where you're coming from, where it's like if you're in the middle class or higher class jobs where you get vacation, health insurance, that's an awesome thing. But when you come from the service industry, like where I know a bunch of people, it's like, it's not that nice, because like, what's going to happen. Because like, if it's
Oh, it's too hot on Fitzi's end, everybody.
Well, you heard it here first. I'm testing my new camera.
Well, hello,
Quick
everybody.
break.
The sexiness of this podcast is now doubled. I just
I will
welcome
start
to
the
the
camera.
Creative Infinite Sean podcast. I am now your only host. Fitzi has been removed by the algorithm. It didn't like anything he was saying, so I'm going to take over this podcast fully now.
Edit that out, so don't even worry.
We are not editing any of this out. So anyway, now that I have the floor, I want to actually talk about some
If you
real
talk
topics.
too much, then I don't have to edit it out. So.
Oh man. So for all of you creatives out there, I would say that I actually think that Biden's got our back on this a bit. I think there's a lot of firms out there that I've seen that love to use creatives and then take up all of their time. So let's say, have a creative contractor for 30 to 40 hours a week, and then that person gets no benefits, that person gets no protection. They force that person to drive into the office all the time. So I think having some protections is good. I think there's got to be this line in the sand of once you do 30 hours at a same place, let's say, or 40 hours, then maybe that place does need to give you some benefits by law. I kind of like that because there's so many companies that play in that whole contractor world. I'm always dealing with it where there's these companies that just kind of they want to give you the very least amount of
where
things.
Did we stop?
And so, I'm still talking. You just interrupted. And so, I think the biggest thing here for me on this Biden proposal is that, I think it's a great thing. I think there's so much abuse that's going to happen going forward. I think the idea of a company is going to change and the contractors are going to change. So thinking about this now is important. I think there's going to be less companies that are your classic brick and mortar in the future, and there's going to be more Ubers and stuff. Even in the creative world, I think design agencies are going to be more design collectives and things like that.
So the problem is right now I didn't hear anything because I didn't have the headphones on for the switching camera.
All right, and we're back, everybody. Fitzi's back on the podcast. All my crap talking about him and his terrible podcasting abilities will stop, and we'll go back to our regular scheduled programming.
Yeah, so where did we stop? You asked me what I thought about it, and I think I'm more on the negative side for the bottom tier of the economy versus where it's a good thing on the upper end. I think that was my summary. Well, what is your summary on that, or what is your opinion on that? Besides, I
kind of just gave it, but I'll give a quicker one now. So what I would say is, in short, I think companies are going to all becoming Uber. I think a lot of companies are going to become the Ubers of what they do. I think people see that works really well. But I think with that being said, with companies changing from brick and mortar, you see it now that there's less and less people in the offices. I think, we need to have these protections. I think it's good that Biden's already thinking about this because I think Uber and stuff like that in 10 years is going to be just a more popular type of business.
But that will not happen with that proposal because it makes it nearly impossible. Let's say you come up with a startup and you have to figure out how to hire those people for a job that doesn't exist. Where Uber was okay, we don't have to hire anybody. People who sign up will make it work. Basically you get rid of the ability of hiring somebody for free, with no promise. Because in the end, when you sign up for Uber, you want to be an Uber driver. If you get a car, if you have a car and there's maybe somebody picking you up, we can pay you. But when you hire somebody and you have to give them health insurance, we're okay, I need $50K for one employee now, so I can afford a salary of 30, whatever,
Yeah, well, essentially, what you're doing is you're mining out the hiring process, which is a pain in the butt thing to do. To have interviews, to have people come in, and that's what you're getting rid of, and that saves so much money in any company. So, if any company, you could say we could eliminate the entire HR department, all of the hiring. And people will hire themselves. I mean, I don't know. I could see this working. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I know of some creative collectives out there where they're essentially temp agencies that they just shoot me jobs all the time, but they're all small gigs and stuff. I think that's the structure it's going to go forward because you see it a lot where a lot of people just don't hang out at a company anymore. I just think that idea of a classic company of brick and mortar, you have employees. I just think that's going to go away. You see it going away now,
but not if that proposal gets through, because then you cannot do that.
Yes and no. I don't think this proposal is necessarily saying we're done with gig workers, we're done with contractors. I think what it's saying is that it's kind of saying that there's going to be more gig workers, there's going to be more contractors, so we need to protect these people because there's more and more every day than there ever was. So when the economy becomes more gig workers than regular workers, that means we need to start thinking about the gig workers. We need to start giving them some of the protections because if we have a whole economy made of people with no protections, yeah.
Well, it's quite interesting, you know. Like laws can be really interesting because like they can just shake up everything. And sometimes I'm thinking like, for what do we need politicians, you know? And do they do anything besides like lobbying and whatever? And then it's like, oh yeah, they can basically screw up everything. It's wild.
Well, yeah, and they're not supposed to screw it up. It's supposed to make it better. But you know, another thing in the law world that popped up was a Supreme Court case. So now, this week, Supreme Court started to kind of, dust off their tomes of rules and laws that they need to change and mess with. And in that world,
hot news.
There's been there's been this argument, in a lot of creatives have seen this year after year after year of an art piece coming out and it being made in the likeness of an existing art piece. So in this case, there's a painting of Prince that looks like an existing photo of Prince that was taken by another artist. A lot of you guys may remember the Shepard Fairey lawsuit where he used Obama's face for the Hope poster and then got sued by the photographer that took that picture. And so the time-old debate, as we are on here talking about AI and all of this, well, if you change it enough, and that argument, well, the Supreme Court is really looking at that argument now of like, what is the level that you can protect your artwork and what's feasible? So what do you think of this? I mean, is this a scary kind of thing, or do you like that this is being heard by the Supreme Court?
I mean, like the Supreme Court is just like a bunch of people like you and I. It's just like how it is, and it's really depending. They're not smarter. They're just like have different views, But like the politicians, they just affect everything. Copyright in general is like kind of painful because like it hinders so much, Rachel's doing like my wife is doing like homeschool for like to get a special degree of some type. She needs to buy one of those books, and the book is like $200. I'm like, what? And now they're putting codes in there so that you cannot just like share it, and you need that specific code so that you can use like the online thing so that they can force you to pay the $200. And that is like the copyright at its peak, you can build monopolies about like whatever IP you build, What is nice, but it's also like, okay, yeah, we're like gatekeeping. We want to make sure that we can discriminate if you don't have the money. I think the world would be better off with no copyright and only the best surviving kind of sort of. Like, let's say you create a song and somebody else makes that song better. He deserves all the fame because he made it really nice. You maybe came up with it, but the population will enjoy his song more because he reiterated it better, and would have greater value for the community. But with copyright, you can make sure, like, I made the song, and you're not allowed to do this, or you have to share profits. And also, it's like, it's that weird spectrum. You make something nice for one person who invented it, or you make it nice for the population, Because, like, free education would be easier to do if there was no copyright, Well,
let me ask you this. Who painted the Mona Lisa?
Well, it was one specific dude, but it's like he inspired a bunch of people, and then that basically led into like, oh, I want to be a famous artist and do like some drawings.
Now, which artist copied the Mona Lisa famously?
I am not sure about that.
So what I'm making with that example is that if we allow everyone to just iterate over and over again, like I come out with a piece of art and then anyone can improve on it, and then if they improve it better, then screw me. I think that you lose the impact every time. I actually wouldn't like to be in a world where every single thing is just constantly remixed. I love the impact of like the original thing personally. So I kind of have to push back on that notion of that the world would love everything being remixed into infinity. I don't know if I'd like that. I have like favorite songs that if I heard some other band do it, and I didn't like that band, but it's better. The community thinks it's better, so now I would be mad. I would be like, no, what? So now,
But that is the point, though. Every community has a different standard, and sometimes I see like people making songs and it's original, and I don't like it, and then I'm like, oh, there's a metal version, and I'm vibing to it, and I'm like, this is cool. And I think this should be a thing. So that is like where I'm like, copyright can be so annoying, because like, oh, now you cannot play that riff in that same order, or you cannot have the same rhythm. I'm just like, what?
it does get to a place. I definitely agree where it's like, music is a good example because there's only so many keys, there's only so many notes, there's only so many damn chords and chord progressions, right? So like, so I could go on a piano right now, play 5 random keys, and I'm sure that exists in so much music.
But you could play 20. Somebody did it.
Yeah, and we're getting to that level, right? And then with AI art and just this ability for people to make art faster, it's like, yeah, so if I can come up with 100 pieces of art per day, then I guess I could stake my claim on 100 pieces of things. So that's so I get your argument there of like,
I'm not saying like I have the perfect solution. I'm just like saying the more laws there are, the worse it is, and it basically kills
creativity. Do you think it's the government's job? Should it be the government's job to make these rules? I think that's an interesting point all in its own, right? Should artists and creatives, should we be self-governing, or should it be the government tell us what to do? What do you think?
On the one side, you need rules, because like, oh, you stole my song, and now I get my buddies, and we're just like kind of get rid of you, that would happen if you governed it yourself, Like some people are like really obsessive, like how dare you, and people get killed over less, and it's like we need rules and guidelines, but also like they are not perfect, and the more rules we have, the worse it gets, kind of, you know what I mean? So I'm like,
okay.
Yeah, so it's like it's weird, because like tax code, for example, a lot of rules, a lot of things you can and shouldn't do, and it's like, if it would be simple and easy rules, it would run more efficient. But yeah.
So I guess if you were bequeathed the king of the land, and you had to make a decision on people copying or not copying art, I guess what would be your decision? What would you think if you had all the power? What would you think?
This is a tough one because, like I said, as a creative, I want to make a living off my art, and I completely get where you come from. You put all the time, skill in there, and now you have AI, and it's just like a press of a button, and they're like, oh, it looks better, But AI did it for free, and it's maybe better. So should we just abolish that tool just because of copyright? Maybe. I don't know.
And I guess you brought up in the last episode, you brought up a good point of, is polished even better, right? I mean, you said it in that thing yourself. The human quality can sometimes be even better than the machine quality. So that's an interesting thing on its own too.
Like I said, personally, I wouldn't be able to make the decision correctly because no matter what you do, you will hurt people. Either you say like copyright is a good thing, and then you have people putting keys into the books and make you sign up online for like a course that you technically don't really need, and monetizing like their monopoly. And on the other side is like if you give it out for free, everybody has the knowledge and can do whatever they want and maybe use it for good, even if they're poor.
I think I'm going to know your answer to this already, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I want to hear it. What's your answer? First, what's the question, then the answer.
That's usually the order. Are you ever afraid of your stuff being stolen out there? Do you ever wonder? Do you ever think your stuff that's hanging out there? Do you ever have that fear?
Yes and no. Like I had like a YouTube video got stolen when I did a review about my inliners, and it performed well. I got like 5 or 10K views on it, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool, And then I'm like, found that video, re-uploaded under a different channel and whatever, and I'm just like, it didn't perform well. By him, it only got like 100 views. I'm like, this is odd. But I'm like, I took it like as a compliment. But like talking about my camera stance, I'm like, I would be a little bit upset,
Yeah,
but
you saw exact copies, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like kind of afraid about it because like I know they would come up with a better quality, they would come up with that, and then I compete against everybody else, and I basically don't have an advantage that also keeps me from posting, doing stuff with it. So the fear is there, and it prevents, yeah.
Yeah, well, because in the 3D modeling world, it's a lot easier to steal an idea, right?
Yeah,
Would you say?
everything digital is easy to steal, like or to
Yeah.
reimagine or reiterate or whatever.
So let's say like I'm some evil guy out there. I'm gonna steal your stands. Like what? How would I go about that? You think? Like would I? Is there like is your stands file like out there on the internet? Is there something close enough I could grab and change, or would I just have to recreate it just visually looking at it? Or
Yeah, it's recreating visually or hiring somebody on for $5. Hey, make me this just different. And there
yeah,
you are.
yeah. Hmm,
Like the
interesting.
system of like doing evil is easy, but that is like the
Yeah.
problem. It's too easy to reiterate, and it maybe is better. And then I have
Hmm.
to compete with that shop and basically like, okay, now I have to make mine better. And that's what I'm doing actively. Like that's why I don't want to sell my 3D prints. I want to sell my neon resin shenanigans that I have back there.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, well, and in your case, it's interesting because so in Creative Commons law, in intellectual law, what they a lot of courts like to look at is did you sell a product? And if you haven't sold a product, so for anyone out there, if you have an idea, a cool creative idea that you don't want anyone to steal, just know that concepts and ideas can be stolen. They are not protected by law. No concept is protected by law. However, once you design a product and you release a product that someone has spent money on, even if it could be the age old, like have your mom spend $1 and have that fee somehow recorded somewhere,
Hmm.
then now that product is now protected by copyright law technically. So one thing that I would definitely do if you're out there, if you're Fitzi and you have this kind of object and you have this 3D print you've been working on, sell it quickly to someone. Get something, get some invoice, get someone to buy it. Now it's protected because before that moment, it's technically not protected because it's not a product.
Yeah.
So
But on that note, though, like people in general are very nice, but then the people that are out there abusing the system, they're like evil people. So it's like it's sometimes surprising how shameless some people can be with like stealing stuff. You know what I mean? And they
oh
don't even
yeah,
bother. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm just running a profit. And then they're like,
yeah,
oh, why do I get banned from Etsy, Facebook, YouTube, whatever? Sorry,
yeah.
too much.
Yeah, no, and it's totally no. You're right. I mean, that's it's all over the place. There's people because there's those people that aren't even creatives, and that's the people that I hate to see is the people that are just coming into the creative world and just staking their claim and being like, I can do better at business than all these creative people, and that's it's gross. It's I see it too. I see people taking ideas all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
But on the one side, it's like kind of like how I mentioned, like, oh, now I have to make it better to compete with the market. So it is a positive thing for the economy, kind of sort of, like I have to do the research and development, and I have to actively do it. Where if I have a 100% monopoly, I can have a shitty idea and monetize it, make most of the money. Somebody could be out there having the product better and more efficient, cheaper to make, and whatever, and it would good for the economy, would save materials and whatever. But nope, not allowed because no copyright. He does not have the copyright. Yeah, so it's like it's a weird balance, to everything.
Yeah, and in a way, it's like a class battle too, really, right? Because if I'm rich, I can buy a nice 3D printer. Therefore, I can come out 3D printers while a poor person's behind me, as someone that can't afford it now, but maybe later. Well, I'm 5, 10 years ahead of that guy. So it's another class divide of like if you can afford the technology and stuff before the poor people, then you can stake your claims before the poor people even get a chance to stake their claims.
Yeah.
So that's it's an interesting thing there too, right? Because 3D printers, while they're getting cheap, they're not like for lower class people. They're like at least middle class type of thing. Like
What do you think a 3D printer cost?
I saw one the other day that was insanely cheap. There was like $100, $120 one, but I think that stuff's
Yep.
suspicious to me because every 3D printer guy that I know, like you, has had to have all these parts that they've had to print, and like all of your guys' stuff you've had to fix yourself. So when I see a $120 printer, I'm like, oh, I'd probably just have to print all of its own parts the entire time I have it.
Yeah. So, but that is what I kind of use. I use a $200 printer, and it paid more than for itself, and then I bought another one. If you buy a second printer, buy the same printer again, so you have reliability and redundancy. What is very nice to have in business, because like with cameras, in the beginning when I did YouTube, I bought a bunch of different cameras just to now I can make a review about the camera because it's different than the one that I have.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like getting hired for a gig, and now the footage is not matching because like different color styles and whatever. And it's like it's better to have like same brand everything, even though the brand is maybe not the best. What is like interesting concept.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we've talked about that in past episodes. That's all on purpose too, I'm sure. Of like, yeah, brands don't like to talk to each other, and so it's interesting. I think. So yes, I mean, I guess if you were to look into your crystal globe on like this whole conversation about change it enough and it's yours, where do you see this going? I mean, do you see there being like a future, like Armageddon of creativity, like that this hits where it's like it's too little, too late, or do you think that that like we're on a precipice of losing our ego, not being so attached to things being awesome for us, but being awesome for the community? Do you think that we're on the precipice of something like that?
I think like it's a pendulum. If you go too much in that one direction with too many rules, too many laws, it would be very painful to live in that society, and especially if all laws get enforced and whatever. And I think like the average person or something, there was a statistic out there in America breaks like 300 laws every day, and you don't even know them. And it's like that complicated already. Like if they would get enforced, you would be arrested no matter what. Because like there's things you're doing wrong that you didn't know are a thing because you're not in that environment, or you doesn't really matter. Too many laws, But on the other side, if there's no laws and we just do everything for the community, it would be really good, but also it would be just like, I don't know, it would be not very sustainable.
Yeah.
Because like it wouldn't go anywhere. So on the one side, it's like all hippie. The other one is all too structured and nothing is creative.
Right. Okay. So, okay, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think, yeah, it's hard to say, right? It's just hard to say what's going to happen with it. But I think what's interesting to me is seeing the music industry and seeing how music itself is having the exact same thing happen, right? You see it all the time with stock music sounding similar to songs that exist already, but it's different enough. And I don't know. And then I don't know. It's interesting, right? I think like we all just have to be prepared, though. I mean, like if you were to like talk to a young creative about this, about protecting their work, about not protecting their work. I mean, what would be your advice? I mean, to like a young creative, like reading all these things.
Well, what was the art of war or the war of art, whatever? Like there's like two books. The one is about actively war, and the other one is about like the war within yourself to create art. But there's like you should learn from a lot of artists, copy their style and evolve your own style out of like all the combinedness. What is just like with copyright that should be not allowed, in the extremist form. But I think like if you're like a young creative, whatever you do, just copy what you like and make your own style out of it. And when you blow up, like let's say you make that song and you get the 100 million views or whatever, you maybe get sued, but that won't be maybe the capital, the jumping pad to the new career, and you can evolve from that. Because like nobody will sue you for like, oh, you copied that song because like it sounds like that, but you're tiny, you don't make any money. They only sue because like, oh, now I can make money off my copyright, kind of sort of situation.
Yeah,
so like in the beginning it doesn't matter. The bigger you become, the more it matters, because like if you steal stuff in the beginning, it just builds a shitty foundation, and then like let's say you grow and you have that career, everything is stolen, you will still steal when you're like up there, and then it will be not sustainable. But if you have like a healthy iteration, you can build.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it. I think it's it's that famous quote from Pablo Picasso of good artists take, bad artists steal, and I think there is something to that, right? Like we all take ideas, we all it's not like, we invented the things that we do now. You had to watch someone and be like, that's neat. I want to do something just like that. So
Yeah.
so there is something to that process that we've all done. Every single person has taken something, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all
And I mean,
taken.
that's how we learn.
Exactly. So, but then there's stealing, and I think yeah, it's just about us like kind of making sure that we're good about separating that, right? So yeah, taking someone's thing and changing it with literally the goal to not improve it, but to just take it. That's stealing. I think that's then just stealing. But to be like, hey, here's these stands. I could do it better than this guy, but I'm going to use his as a jumping off point. Now that's taking. Now that's like you're improving it. I'm also a fan more and more. When I was a young creative, when I first came out of college, I was like really competitive with people. I would get like so competitive, just being in a room with you. Like I would just meet you and immediately be like, you and me are gonna have to fight. Like I better get ready for this fight to the death somehow. And I used to be like that, and it's taken me a long time in this career to realize that like all ships float when we get better. So if Fitzi is doing better, I'm going to do better. If other designers are doing better, I'm going to do better. It's going to push the industry to a good spot.
Yeah.
So
but on that note, though, like competition is nice too. Like you can have a healthy mindset, and it's like, oh, Sean is doing good stuff, and I'm buddies with Sean, but I still can compete with you. Like oh, you put that out there, now I have to put something out there. Like I see that with my video buddies all the time. They posted a video, and I want them to do good, but now I need to post something too. Or who can post more, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
What is like healthy and unhealthy at the same time.
Yeah, well, I guess yeah. Let's segue into a topic that I just thought of this moment. Um, so how how do you help other creative friends in that regard? How do you help? I mean, in terms of like, do you do you think it's good to like to critique your friends' work critically and stuff like that? Do you think it's good to kind of push them in that world? Sorry, I'm trying to like form my actual question here.
No, I mean, I exactly know what you're trying to say. Like, should you basically shit all over their work, or should you not? Because, like, on the one side, like, as a videographer, everybody's like, whoa, you see everything, and you saw beautiful stuff, like, the standard is so high. So, no matter what video I see, I'm like, oh, I would have changed that. I would have made that clip a little bit shorter, or whatever. Like, I can critique my stuff, and I know when I'm like, oh, I still did it that way. I should have done it differently, but obviously situational. This is the best what I could do at the moment because of whatever excuse, And everybody thinks that, And
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's good to critique when people ask for a critique. You know what I mean? Because there's like things where I'm like, oh, I would like to get critiqued on how I speak. There's like sometimes when I'm like speaking too many meme phrases, and it's like thinking in memes, speaking in memes is bad because like it's very relatable, kind of, Like he needs some milk, misses a couple syllables, you know what I mean, and a couple binding words. But it's like, oh, I use it because it's funny, but now my speech is deteriorating, so I have to actively think about that, and it's a real problem for me. Like my grammar got worse with the internet because of that. Because like I have those memes in my head. I like saying certain phrases. He okay, instead of like, is he okay, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think like critique is needed, and people can deal with it, and some people can't deal with it. It's really depending to who you speak. I personally like to be critiqued because it pushes me like into a mode where I'm like, oh, now I know what I can attack, and if I can erase just like one thing that I make constantly wrong. In the beginning I had like a situation where I said instead of like sweet, I typed sweat. And I always typed, instead of like, hey, that's sweet,
Mm-hmm.
I typed in that sweat, and it is a bad thing. After I learned that, it's never happened again.
Yeah.
So same with my work creatively. I like learning things, and some
Mm-hmm.
things I choose to adapt, and some things I don't choose to adapt. But then it's a conscious decision.
Well, it's hard to give feedback, right? Just like it's hard to sometimes get feedback. It's so interesting. Even I find myself resistant to feedback sometimes. You would think that like if anyone watching knew how much and how intense some of my feedback has been against me, you'd be like, why would you even be weird with feedback now. You've already been through boot camp, really.
Yeah.
But even I, to this day, sometimes will find myself. What's really funny is like I know that you've had this experience too. I think a lot of the younger the creative you are, I think the more you experience this until you get kind of a hard skin on you. Is that so like you get this kind of offended feeling at first, right? Like so you show me a new video
bitterness.
you're really excited about. You worked your butt
sets
off,
in.
and you send it to me, and I'm just like, dude, you know that
How dare you?
your color grading's kind of crappy. I mean, I'm sorry
Yeah.
to say this whole video, like it's a good video, but it's this thing really sucks.
Yeah.
That a lot of people, and I feel it. Maybe you don't feel this, which is awesome if you don't, but feel at least that initial like the defensiveness, that like how dare you, like, but if you can move past that and be like, you know what, this person does care about me. They care about my art and my craft. You can start to be like, okay, all right, maybe there's some truth to this. You know, and then later that night at 3 a.m., your eyes dart open, and you're like, oh my god, he's right. Oh my god. But
I think like I learned from Rachel. It's called the sandwich tactic. You know, say something nice, say something what you mean, and then say something nice again to just package it better. And as a German, we don't really do that. We just like, hey, I think this should be this way. And I'm very ruthless and pragmatic. What is bad? So I really have to practice certain things. And I'm like, for me, it's really hard because like, I don't mean it bad. If I give critique or I say something, then I mean it just like with the best, thing. But like you said, if you say it the wrong way, you get that bitterness, that feeling, and it prohibits change, And not all change needs to be done. It has to be like an active decision, like, hey, I stand with this or I don't stand with that. But at least I need to know, like, hey, that person maybe thinks different.
yeah, and what I find a lot is asking questions seems to take down armor, right? So if you color graded something weird, instead of me coming in and being like, this color grading sucks, being like, well, why did you choose this color grading? Like, tell me your process, and then starting to, because I like to do that a lot, where they kind of come up with their own answer of like, oh, you're right, I didn't really think of the color grading, or well, I didn't really think about it that much. I'm like, oh, well, there you go. So it's asking the questions too, I find, because then you're empathetic. Now I'm listening. I'm not telling you you need to be better. I'm like, no, tell me, like, why do you think you suck? And then we'll work backwards from there. But it's interesting because that's one of my telltale signs of someone that's an amateur creative versus a seasoned creative. Can I give you feedback? And what does your face look like when I give you feedback? Does it look like I literally just called your mom a dog, or does it look like I just saved your life? Like, for me, it's like I am pretty grateful when someone's like, "Hey, just so you know, like this isn't how websites are done, or this thing isn't done this way." Like I said, I too will sometimes feel that kind of like defensiveness at first, but I always have to like remind myself that like people don't have to tell you things. They don't. No one has to tell you your stuff sucks. No one.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of clients this when they're like, "Well, what's the importance of a brand? What's the importance of a logo?" No one's ever going to say they're not going to buy my product because of a logo. And I'm like, "You're exactly right. They're just not going to buy your product. No one will ever tell you your branding sucked. They're just not."
Yeah, or
going to
they
use
don't
you.
know. Like in most cases, people do stuff without knowing why they do stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's like when you have a click funnel, for example. Oh, I bought something and it was so easy to check out because like it was just there and I accidentally bought it in under 5 seconds. But if that process had taken 10 seconds and the button looked like kind of weird and that kind of disturbed me, I'm like, oh, now I'm like, why is that button look so weird? It looks cheap. I'm like, should I buy from that site? Is that site a scam? Stuff like that matters. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and sorry everyone if you hear a train in the background.
I did. Do you have a train?
Around. Yeah, I have a train nearby. I usually close the window, but not today. So I mean, it's interesting. So because the whole feedback thing is just because what's cool about the feedback? Because talking about the beginning of this, we were talking about people stealing stuff. I think it's so much of a better move to give feedback to that person. I mean, so like let's use a random example. Let's say I find a guy on Etsy who's made like a hat stand that I really like, and let's say instead of just copying his idea and stealing it, I'm like, well, actually, there's a way to improve this. Why don't you reach out to that guy and tell him like, hey man, I have some ideas to improve this. Can I help you or work together? Because I mean, who knows, that connection you just made. And it'll take a lot less time for you to give a guy an idea than for you to steal the idea and to do it. So it's like I would almost challenge like if you have a great idea, reach out to someone and give them idea. Be like, here's a gift. Here's a gift on a platter. Can we be friends? Because that's a pretty kingly gift to get from the very beginning. To be like, I have an idea.
It's a weird balancing act. You have to be really, really good with like, hey, with like building that sandwich and building that. Have you ever thought about why your headstand is actually like this way? And and it's like you don't know where you will get with that weird sandwich that you have to build to get into that position, because you have to say a lot of nice things to get access to something, to build a partnership. So I kind of see where you're going towards. I'm like, yeah, that would work and that would be a possibility. But on the one side, like, being forced into research is like kind of nice too, because like, hey, this one stand sells better because it's round and I like that design, Then you're like, oh, I need to improve mine. And then it becomes that competition. Mm-hmm. But it's like, it's a balancing act on both sides. I like where you're going.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too because it's like, I don't know, I also like just like starting conversations too. So even feedback doesn't necessarily need to be like, do this thing better. It could be like, hey man, this kind of reminds me of something else. Do you know this artist? And you're like, no, I didn't know this artist. Oh, well, he does something similar. Let me show you.
Yeah.
And that stuff I like too. I really do like that. That happens a lot with my paintings, for example, where they're like, your paintings make me think of this painter. And it's like, I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, definitely let me know because it helps me to know what's going on too.
Yeah. I mean, there's no right or wrong way. I think, like, no matter, as long as you're like keeping improving. The problem with critique is like people just ignore it. They get offended and ignore it, kind of, and people don't like really changing. So it's like really hard to make a person change unless there's some physical pain. Because like, why should I redesign something if it kind of works? You know what I mean? But like a 5% or a 2% increase in like sales would be nice and measurable but you would not notice it immediately, maybe.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even sales. Sometimes I'll, this hasn't happened in a while, where I'll look at something and I'll actually ask them, did you enjoy making this? And it'll kind of catch people off guard. They'll be like, well, not really. I kind of had a hard time making it. I didn't know this. And sometimes the feedback there is like, well, let's find out how we make this something you like. There's been a few times I've done that. I've been like,
yeah.
Well, okay, you don't like this thing you're showing me, but what do you like? What is there something you're proud of? Is there something out there? And like, let me help you. How do we get this to there then? So not all feedback is like this can be better, so we can make more money, or this can work better. Sometimes it's simply like, I get it. You're trying to figure out. You're in that muddy water. Let me try to help you here. Like you're trying to figure it out. Which is so helpful. I mean, like, the first time I picked up Blender, even having people like you that were just kind of giving me advice from the fringes is so helpful when you're like in a new world and you're trying to figure it out. So, yeah. So it's interesting. So it's like, this episode we kind of talked about, the protections that could happen for us as creatives, and how like the world is getting a little bit more stringent and crazy with how we treat creativity.
Yeah.
But we can still be helpful, right? It sounds like, it comes back to that community of like...
It's kind of funny how you can see it. No pain, no gain, Like, nobody stealing, no gain on research and development or survival of the fittest, And you can see it in those extremes, but you also can see it in those, like, healthy ways where it's like, we need a little bit, but not too much competition, Like... Yeah. That's how I see it. Like, it's a little bit, like, I'm a little bit more on the aggressive side on that, where I'm like... You need to fail often, and the more often you can fail, the better, because then you get more process, more knowledge, and whatever. Where it's like, okay, let me polish this and take some time, make it really nice, and then maybe don't make it, or maybe I make it, but I don't know how many, iterations I will get through.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just it's an interesting world we live in, where you can either help, you can hurt, you can steal, you can improve. I mean,
so many ways.
you have kind of more options now than ever to do so many different things. I mean, if we were in the 1600s and we wanted to copy Da Vinci, that would be pretty hard. Where now to copy a Da Vinci, as we've shown on Midjourney and stuff, is not impossible. Yeah. So we live in a weird time where like you kind of you're more God than ever before. You can choose what gets destroyed and what gets improved, and that's both amazing and terrifying. So it's interesting to see that the government's trying to come up with laws to to kind of come up with some structure. But it all comes back to we can't forget as creatives to help each other, to give feedback, to not steal, to maybe take, maybe improve, but do not steal. Don't hurt each other. It comes back to you. So all these creatives, we have to work together, because now there's people too that aren't creatives that are in our world stealing too. So we have to help each other.
Yeah, like we're all a community, and if you don't build a community, it's a bad thing. But on that note, my cat just brought in a lizard, and I think we have to kind of make this like a quick one now, because like I want to save that lizard to don't be a cruel part of this world. And yeah.
Those cat interruptions, man. Those cat interruptions. They're almost.
I know.
Every
Isn't it a
episode
rough
now.
one today?
We're have to give him a camera here in a second.
Yeah.
But cool, man. Well, it's been a good talk. The next episode is going to be a live one, so everybody get ready for that.
So excited for that, actually, because like we're gonna be here, we're gonna sit there, and we're gonna basically sit in our chair and be like, "Hey, Sean, what's going on?" Nothing, and yeah, we'll be great.
So we're just gonna hang out and stare at each other for a whole hour. It's gonna be
awkward
amazing.
silence. This will be great. And then like, Fitzi, why is the camera running out of battery juice? And I'm like,
and stay tuned soon, everybody. So we didn't do our call to action, but like and subscribe, and then also stay tuned. We're talking about starting a Patreon or something very soon. So please stay
OnlyFans with
tuned.
Sean.
The OnlyFans is later. We're really building up the content there. It's been hard. The photographer's kind of, been hard to work with. So we're doing mostly Midjourney nudes on there, mostly AI generated nudes at the moment. But anyway,
you got to get that size longer somehow, otherwise it doesn't really work.
But so stay tuned for all of that and more. There will be so many paywalls for you to pay. It's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been a fun talk, man, and I guess we will see each other in face next time. But for everyone at home,
sweet.
See you guys. Be creative.
Nice. Oh. Well